Welcome to the second half of Art 1.2. We're going to talk for the next few weeks about world art that's outside the Western canon, as they're called. And we don't mean the military weapon, but the group of artists and art styles that we've been studying are all Western art sources. So we're now going to broaden the scope of this second half and include places like today's topic is mostly India and Pakistan, South Asia as is usually called. And we are also going to have several new definitions. And so if you've got you should always have next to you, next to your laptop, the list of terms to know. And I think we'll get to all of them. But if we don't, we'll finish maybe the last one or two slides on Monday. Before we get to the slides, though, because I usually have a few people joining us late, I wanted to address something that happened after the fact, or that I noticed, I should say, didn't happen. I just noticed after the midterm. First of all, thank you all for those who sent me your midterms before the deadline. And because and I have to stick to this, or I'm not being fair to those who did turn theirs in on time, the cutoff of midnight, I did notice 35 people. That is really good. I was encouraged. I think I said that before I signed off on Monday at the end of the exam. Out of, I think it's 37 or 38 in the class, that's nearly that's 90% attendance or more. But I only got 30 exams. So obviously there were 5 people who, none of whom signed off early, whoever they are. I'm not going to try and figure out. I don't know yet because I've just started logging the test in. And by the way, so far the grades are pretty good. But I have only one way I can help out those students without being unfair or bending the rules for any one group. That isn't appropriate. Of course, everyone has to have the same opportunities in a level playing field. You know, the phrase equity, of course, now is particularly important in our current society. So here's what I've decided to do. I've consulted with a couple of my readers, a couple of former students, and one or two other current SRJC professors. If you were one of those 5 people, obviously you wouldn't be able to do a makeup because the only exception is if you weren't able to physically attend that lecture or that exam, and those 5 people did. They didn't sign out. They were still on my participant list. See, so I can't allow a makeup, but I can increase the extra credit option for everybody in all my classes, the 1 in-person class and the 2 online classes. I'm teaching 3 classes this semester for everybody to 60 points. Now, what does that mean? If you're one of those who, for whatever reason, didn't even go ahead and turn in partially completed exam, you'd have gotten some points. Even it's better than nothing. But if you didn't, it's too late, of course. But it's not too late. I want to be encouraging and get you to see how you can help yourself and give yourself a chance at a decent grade, even if somehow you didn't get the exam turned in on time. I'll just leave it at that. You can make up 60 of those points with extra credit. And mathematically, that at least gives you a decent shot at a B anyway, if you do well on your remaining assignments, of course. That would be the second paper. Those I've started grading and probably be ready in a week to give them back. This is my largest class. And those look pretty good. I haven't gotten one that was, below a B yet. But of course, there could be some that are. But hopefully with extra credits, I'm raising, everyone here's, I'm going to send an email to all my classes, not today. I don't want to get home till 11 o'clock tonight, but tomorrow for all my students in all 3 of my sections, you all have the same equal chance. You can raise your total points by up to 60 points if you take advantage of all or several anyway of the extra credit options. The maximum will be the same for everybody. And that would be the same as if you took the exam and got a bare passing grade, and then you did hopefully better on the final A and B, of course, well on your 2 papers. You still could get a B in the class. I'll actually prove that to you mathematically once I have the grades entered and I can explain how that system works. So hopefully that gives you a reason not to get discouraged. But whatever your reason was, it doesn't matter. It's water under the bridge. If you're one of those 5 people that were in the lecture and saw the slides, but somehow didn't get in on time, if I were you, immediately shift to trying to get as much extra credit as you can. Okay, let's see. Here we go. Let's admit Justine. Okay, we're just starting. We didn't miss anything. Okay, so that will allow, for people who might otherwise barely have a chance at a C if they did everything perfectly, to at least have a pretty reasonable chance at a B. You wouldn't be able to get an A because it's 100 points that you're missing, but to make up 60 of them with extra credit is very doable for everybody. Is that clear? Anybody have any questions? I think that's reasonably flexible. I think that's as much as I should do in terms of bending, my own rules, but it isn't unfair to those who turned your test in on time either. That wouldn't be appropriate to give those people who didn't an extension. I said I wouldn't do that, and I obviously, therefore, I can't. Hopefully, everyone who is interested in continuing to get look at, listen to, take notes on the lectures will get good grades, even if you didn't actually turn your exam in on time. The midterm I'm talking about, you still can recover if you use all the extra credit options, up to 60 points. All right, so let's get started with the first slide for today. And I'm going to go ahead and give you a context where, as I've said in the past, it ends up being a set of facts that you don't have to take notes on until we get to the first slide, which this is, but I'm going to give you the context first. Actually, why don't I do this? Here we go. This is not on the syllabus, so you don't have to write any of this, but I think it helps for some of you. I know we have some students from this part of the world. I've noticed in the mini bios. Sometimes I can go a year, 2 semesters without anybody from South Asia, but we often have students from that part of the world. And I have a great interest and respect and admiration for the ancient culture. So here's the facts that you may or may not already know about India. First of all, it is the second most populous country in the world after China. But at the rate their population is growing, they will surpass China within a few years. They will be, they nearly are now, 1.4 billion people in India. And we in the US have 1/3 of a billion in the last census we just took, minus 700,000 people that unfortunately aren't with us because of COVID, even after that. So we have 1/3 of a billion, and we have there are 4 times as many people in India. Here's the point I'm trying to make, and then we'll get to the first slide. 4 times as many people, their total population, with 1/3 the land area. We have about 3.6 million square miles, and India is only barely 1.2 million. That's still pretty big, but it's way smaller than the US. So you don't have to be a math genius to do the calculations. It's simple arithmetic. A country that has 4 times as many people with 1/3 the land is, here's the bottom line, 12 times more crowded than the United States. That says a lot, because that has a lot to do with, of course, the circumstances economically, culturally, and environmentally in India now. And they are the world's largest democracy, by the way. They have been since they became independent from Britain in 1947. And the last fact I'll say is this may be the most important and relevant to our today's lecture, which is that they are one of the 5 India, or you say South Asia, we usually say it that way, which would include Pakistan and Bangladesh. Or that area, South Asia, is one of the 5 oldest urban cultures on the planet. The others are, as you may already know, China, and we've covered a couple of the others. Of course, Egypt, Babylon, which would be basically, Iraq in that area. And the 5th one is one we're going to cover in this section of the course, in the world art portion, and that's Central America, or Mesoamerica. We used to say pre-Columbian, but people don't use that word much anymore. And we'll study them too. Of course, we're not talking about the Aztecs. They're, old, but not ancient. They are a medieval culture. They started around 1300. So we're talking about the Mayans, and even earlier, the Oltec and the Toltec and Olmec. We'll get to them. So that, in other words, summarizing, we're going to now spend time on the other really ancient, early 5,000, roughly, they're all about that old, urban cultures on Earth. And that's today's topic, the South Asian one. Okay, here we go, the first must-know slide. Okay, come on, there. Okay, this is the Outer Gopura, the title. Outer, just like the word outer, and Gopura is Gopura of Menakshi. I know that's an odd word. Minakshi. Menakshi Temple. I'll say it one more time. Outer Gopura of Menakshi Temple is the title. The location is India. We know it took several hundred years to complete this compound, not just the tower that we're going to talk about, but the whole compound. So we don't know the exact year. So if you want to write 13th century would be the 1200s, but if you want to round it off 13 to 1700 in your notes, that's okay. So you can either say 13 to 1700 or the way it is on the syllabus, 13th to 17th centuries. Okay, let's talk about the meaning. Sorry?
So sorry to interrupt, but I think it's spelt wrong on the syllabus. I think it's M-E-E. I looked it up on
Oh, well, I'm going with Stockstead, so if she's wrong, then we're both wrong. Yeah, it's a very valid point. You know how many ways there are to spell Quran? About a dozen. No, maybe not that many, about 8 or 9. And the same thing with Kiev, this capital of the Ukraine. I've been there several times. I have friends there, and I've stayed in touch with them. And they themselves spell it differently sometimes. So I'm just going with what the most recent check I did. It's been a couple semesters. So for instance, if it was a whole different word, for instance, Burma and Myanmar, we're going to talk about that. There's a debate over which is the more proper word for that country. Most people say Myanmar now, but there is a legitimate reason why some, including me, still use the word Burma. I'll explain that when we get to a slide later today that's about that. Okay. So what we have is let's define, thank you for that. I mean, I'm just going to say, just stick to what's, it's important detail you brought up. What's the spelling on the syllabus? Otherwise we get too complicated and too, diffused into what's the right, so in other words, if this is on the test, if it's on the final, it wouldn't be the midterm. We already finished that. Then just use the spelling that's here. And if you choose to write a paper about it, then that'd be a good point, or do extra credit about it. You could then bring up that point. I'm sure you have your very legitimate comment there, but we have to have one set of stated spellings for the syllabus, and that's what you're tested on, of course. Okay, we're getting behind here, so let me give you the definition of a Gopura. A Gopura is a tall, ornate prayer tower, a tall, ornate prayer tower above the entrance to a Buddhist compound. I'm keeping them simple. These are shorter than the definitions in the glossary of Stockstead, by the way, in case you're curious. So don't waste time going back and forth to the glossary when you just the notes I'm giving you in class for when you study for, of course, the final. And those might come up on the true false section, as you saw from the midterm. I'll say it again. Gopura is a tall, ornate prayer tower above the entrance to a Buddhist compound. That's what we're looking at from within the compound. It should be obvious this is part of that compound. Of course, I think everybody knows what the word compound means, right? There could be dozens of buildings in a compound, but this is above one of the entrances. By the way, there are multiple Gopuras in some parts of India in the same compound. This is one of 16. This is all part of the meaning, of course, now for this slide, okay? It's a Gopura, which I just defined, but it's also one of 16 that are around the outer walls, each one above a different gate or different entrance of this obviously very large Buddhist compound. When we say ornate, let's get up a little closer. I think you see these are various Buddhist deities. And we're going to find Buddhism in actually, let's go ahead and do it now because we're already looking at a slide that has to do with Buddhism, even though it's down at the bottom of the page. Okay. Buddhism, the definition, again, simplified to a reasonably minimal but accurate essence of what Buddhism is. And I know a lot of you know more about Buddhism than I might, but I've had a number, my mother included, of family members, friends, relatives, neighbors who practice Buddhism over their lifetime. So I at least have some more exposure than many people might have in this country. So here we go. Buddhism is a religion that began in India about 2000 BCE. Well, you know, that's before Common Era, of course. I'll say it again. A religion that began in India about 2000 BCE, comma. Okay. Second part, which believes in a multitude of deities, which believes in a multitude of deities, okay, that can transform themselves from a spiritual state into a gross body state. That's about the shortest way to define the concept of how the gods are different in Buddhism than Christianity or Islam. You know, those religions, obviously the ones in the West believe in one God, most of them, right? So I'll say it again. It's a religion that began in India about 2000 BCE or BC, which believes in a multitude of deities that can transform themselves from a spiritual state into a gross body state, by which we mean physical, down on earth. They can manifest themselves as physical beings and walk among humans if they choose. And they often do, of course, depending on which God it is you're talking about. So we're not going to have time to talk about the individual Buddhist gods in a class where we cover 5,000, or no, not 5,000, 700 years of history in one semester on 5 continents, but I do want to mention this tower is an example of what that definition states. These are multitudes of Buddhist deities carved in roughly human size figures on this tower, which, by the way, is part of the meaning, is 160 feet tall. So that's about the height of a 16-story skyscraper. That's pretty tall for having been built this far back. The only buildings taller than this were some of the cathedrals. We'll get to those at the, no, we aren't now. No, that's our 1.1, sorry. You probably, some of you took, right, the earlier pre-Renaissance art history classes at the JC or somewhere else, then you might know, or if you've been to Europe. Some of the Gothic cathedrals reach heights of 300 feet, the towers, and even a couple 500, but that's the exception. In most parts of the world, there were no structures as tall as this. It was 160 feet tall, rounded off. Okay, and so that's pretty much the whole meaning on this. The fact that it has to do with Buddhism, and if it's on the exam, you could define Buddhism. I just gave you that definition and then describe this, what this prayer tower is for. It's a course for guarding, you could say, or you could say both decorating and guarding, or marking. You could even say marking the entrance to a Buddhist compound. And so people coming to pray, or those who actually, the Buddhist monks who live there, would pass under the Gopura. And it'd be someone to, you know, check perhaps informally in some way that you were permitted to enter the compound. Okay, formal analysis. It's completely symmetrical left to right. And of course, we're talking about just this part here, because that's not part of the Gopura, right? The base is here. And obviously unbalanced toward the bottom. The rhythm should be obvious, but these are windows, and each of the hundreds, and there are hundreds of carved deities create rhythm, as do the finials. There's no other word for that. Finials, just like it sounds. There are finials on all kinds of architecture, right? At the top of a, you know, peak of a tower or a turret or, you know, a cupola, a roof line, whatever's at the top, if it reaches a point on a building, is called a finial. We're going to see several of those over the next few weeks. So the finials create rhythm, the carved deities, and the windows. It is dynamic. I don't really see much stable about it, except maybe this, the base. Okay, yes, sorry. The base is, and the very top part of, but then when you go up here, these are dynamic because they're round bases and they taper to a point. So it's mostly stable, dynamic, I'm sorry, with only a couple of stable details. Color is a warmer tone, kind of a light brown color, the stone that they use, probably sandstone, but in any case, it's stone. And the textures are simulated here because they use textures on the, you know, bodies of the deities. Carved line is what creates the texture. There's no painted line. And then the modeling would just be shadows from the sun. I did give you the space in one regard, but then we restate. In terms of space, there are no techniques. Remember, for buildings, they don't have techniques for space. They are real space, of course. So it's 160 feet high with windows and small rooms inside. These would be prayer rooms, I'm sure, for probably the monks would use those. It's not hollow though. There's only a few, otherwise it probably would have collapsed. There's a little bit of a small interior space behind each window. Okay, the rhythm, I think I mentioned that right with the, yeah, did we miss anything? Shadows, line, modeling. Oh, mass. Well, I would call it almost one mass, but you could break it down at the tower, the main part of the tower, the shaft, that's called, and then the base, and then the top decorative piece. Okay, moving on. This next one is Qutb Minar. That's Qutb, the first word, Minar, M-I-N-A-R, two words. Qutb Minar. I'm pronouncing as closely as I can. I don't have a lot of practice, with pronunciation of words from South Asia. So if anyone wants to correct me, fine. But the spelling, again, remember now, it's just what we are using from the textbook. Again, Qutb, first word, Qutb Minar, M-I-N-A-R, India, 1236. So what this is a minaret, okay, which is left over from an earlier mosque. So the minaret is the age that is on the syllabus from the 1200s. So this is a part of India where Muslims early, very early on, were immigrating. I mean, that's the only word for it. They were just coming in small numbers. They hadn't dominated it. As you know, I think everyone knows this, right? The Muslims totally took over India for a while. Not now, but for hundreds of years. We'll get to that. But this is before the Muslim conquest of India, in other words, you could say it that way. It's when just some Muslims were immigrating to India. And of course, they worshiped Islam. And so in Islam, I should say, worship Muhammad in their religion of Islam. So they'd build mosques, and those always have a minaret. Well, there are two really early ones in Jerusalem, where all the trouble has been recently, that don't have minarets, but that's the exception. So what's a minaret? That's on your list of terms. Here we go. It's a short definition. Minaret, that's what we're looking at here, this tower. It's a tall, narrow, round prayer tower, comma, a tall, narrow, round prayer tower, comma, at or near the corner of a mosque. At or near the corner of a mosque. This would have been the mosque. I don't think it's functioning. It might be. They might have restored it. I don't know. This is an old slide, probably at least 20 years old. It's what Stockstead had in their files. But the pointed arches, that clearly, and the dome, I mean, those are features that mosques, mosques almost always have. And so that would have originally been the house of worship, which of course in Islam is called a mosque. And next to it, a few feet away, is the prayer tower or minaret. And it's a multi-level prayer tower. Why? Because there's a staircase. This is part of the meaning, of course, still. Inside every minaret that I've ever seen, I've seen hundreds of them. I've been to, I think it's 7 Muslim majority countries. And I've always found it fascinating to hear the prayers called. Sometimes they wake you up first thing in the morning at sunrise, and then at sunset, of course, usually people are awake and you can hear them 5 times a day. In other words, here's the fact you should have in your notes. In a minaret, 5 times a day, the imam, I-M-A-M, is usually how it's spelled. We'd say like head priest in the Catholic Church would be that role, would climb up the stairs, usually all the way to the top, right about here, the highest level, and sing. It's a beautiful sound. Sing the prayers, praising Allah 5 times a day. That's a lot of stairs. That's a lot of climbing. You had to be in good shape. Now they're often broadcast through modern, PA system. I've seen them do that too. Of course, it's true of churches and synagogues too, right? But it's very specific to Islam that it was not just once a day or twice a day or once a week on Sundays or Saturdays, like Christianity and Judaism, 5 times a day, every day, for as long as the mosque is still standing and the minaret is still functioning. An imam is supposed to climb up to, if not the highest level, at least several, levels up, and sing the prayers for that day, first sunrise and then several times during the day and one last time at sunset. Okay, that's pretty much the whole meaning. Let's do the formal analysis. This minaret is about 130 feet tall. I'm rounding off, but that's close enough for it's over 100 feet. But I think you want to be a little more specific. It's well over 100 feet. So it's about or nearly 130 feet tall, and that is the space. Although you can say it's hollow because it has to be for the stairs to go all the way to that top level. Let's take a look. So you could see an imam could come out that door and stand there. Boy, you'd have to be not afraid of heights. I've seen that happen in Jordan. I saw one that wasn't this tall, but it was probably 80 or 90 feet. And the imam in the village I was staying at for 3 or 4 days, every morning would wake us up with the prayer, because I was staying in a small inn near a really old mosque. Okay, so we have the space being hollow, and of course the height being over 100 feet. Well, let's say about 130 feet. And then we have, it's a single mass. Really, you could break it down and say the largest mass is the first section, and then the second, if you wanted to do that, I guess. And the third largest would be this middle section. Okay, the rhythm is obvious with the balconies and the decorative stonework here, plus the doors leading out to each balcony, of course, for the imam to come out and sing the prayers. So there's a lot of rhythm. It's dynamic and stable, equally so, because it's tall and straight and upright, but of course the structure itself is rounded, so it's both. There's no modeling here. It's the shadows from the sun. The lines would be, very minimal here. There's some visual line, I guess you could say. Let's see if it's even, whoops, whoa. Sorry, go away. Cancel. Why did that come up? All right, let's get up to there. There's a little bit of line. Yeah, you'd have to say that with these right ridges here. Minimal. It's visual line. Now remember that's, you could say carved, I suppose. You could say that because they had to carve those. So you could say carved line that forms the visual edges on each of the ridges. But there's no painted or drawn line, of course. Okay, then we have balance. Well, again, the symmetrical. So it's balanced left to right and wider at the bottom, obviously, therefore unbalanced for the bottom. And let's see, texture is the real rough texture of the stonework. Let's see, I think that's it. Modeling texture. Oh, the color is warm. Yeah. Okay, this is one of my favorite of these slides because it really illustrates something that is unique about the paintings done during this period of India's history. So it's a next must know. It's Akbar, that's Akbar, inspecting, just like that word is normally, inspecting the construction of Fatehpur Sikri. Fatehpur, like the word fate, Fatehpur. And then the second word is Sikri. India, 1590. Now we're into the period of the Moguls. Let me see. I can't remember if I put that out as yeah, it is. It's a definition on the beginning of the next page. You know, I sometimes add or take away certain definitions between semesters. But this time, yes, it's on your list, so you want to write this now. A Mogul means the Islamic rulers of India who dominated that subcontinent. You can say country if you prefer, I guess. You can say country or subcontinent because that's what it's called, even though it's nowhere near the size of a continent. The rest of Asia is way bigger, but you could just say that. I'll start over again. It's the Muslim rulers who dominated the country of or subcontinent of India for over 300 years, from circa 1400s to the 1700s. When I say period, okay, everybody got that? Yeah, all right. It's important because they didn't require or force the population to convert. In parts of the world where Muslim invaders took over, they did force in some parts of the world people to convert, but normally most of the Muslim conquests, they allow people to choose if they want to keep their old religion. So that's why today India is 90+% Hindu, but there's still about, well, actually, it's not even that. It's more like 88% or something. It's under 90%, about 12%, in other words, over 10% of the population is Muslim, left over from this period. But you see, they didn't convert. Obviously, if they had, the country would be overwhelmingly Muslim. Whereas in Pakistan, they did. The people in Pakistan did mostly convert for whatever reasons. And so, as you know, I'm sure everybody does, that Pakistan is a predominantly Muslim country, like 95%. But in India, there are over 150 million Muslims today left from this period of the Moguls. So this man, the man we're looking at in this next must-know that we named, Akbar, is this man here. It should be obvious, but if it isn't, I'll enlarge it. He is the Mogul. He's the, emperor, king. There are different words you could use, of course, that mean the same thing. He's the ruler over all of the Mughal empire, and it was an empire because India is pretty big, and they also included in that some of the neighboring areas today, what would be Pakistan and Bangladesh, and even a little bit of Nepal. So it wasn't just India, but the heart of the Mughal empire was India. That's where the rulers lived and spent their time. So what's he doing here? Well, the name of the town is in the title of this slide. He's building a new capital city for himself and the Mughal rulers that he and his descendants will occupy. A royal palace compound, of course, other kinds of public buildings, obviously would be including mosques and public structures. It's a whole city he was having built from scratch, literally, brand new city to be a new capital for the Mughal rulers. And it was called Fatehpur Sikri. So that's the main part of the meaning, but there's another aspect of it that you need to add in the meaning part of your notes. This is a style of drawing that was common to the Mogul, or let's say it was a classic example, this painting is, of the Mogul style of painting. So during that roughly 300 years that they ruled over India, they introduced this. It's fascinating. I've seen these all over where I've traveled in museums. And you can go to the Berkeley Art Museum if you want for extra credit. It's open, by the way. And you'll see a collection of some of these drawings. At least the last time I was there was over a year ago. I think they're still there on display. These fine lines, you see that? They're all not bold outlines. They use fine lines with very meticulous detailing on all of the human figures. Look at how much detail there is on the outfits, the clothing, the headbands, the beards, the faces. It's beautifully done. So very meticulously detailed drawings of human figures in groups, you can say group settings or group activity. There we go. It's in group activities with thin outlines, I'll repeat this, and a variety of warm and cool colors. When you put all that together, that is the Mughal style. I mean, that's not an official term, but that's what many people call it because it came from that culture. So again, it would be very fine detail on all the human figures shown in some kind of group activity with thin outlines and a variety of warm and cool colors. Well, that exactly is what we're seeing here. Look at all the wonderful colors here. Let's go down below. The yellow here and the warm colors, of course, on these two, on the red, and then this guy with his blue tunic, these wonderful animals. And then, of course, over here we have a woman making, probably preparing for making bread, right? Grain of some kind, of course, that's being beaten into some kind of flour or something. So there's food being prepared here, animals, draft animals being brought into, one way or another, either through cheese, milk, or even other possible usages for, feeding the workers. These are the workers. And up here is the emperor with his servants inspecting, like the title tells us, some of the work. They've already finished, about at least 3 buildings we can see here, and the walls around part of the city. It took, I'm sure, many, many years to complete the city, but it was a new capital city that he had built while he was emperor, Akbar. And so he's remembered by historians from that period, or by people in India who are Hindu even, as a very important figure in the history of India. The city's still around. I'm not sure how big it is or if it's still a regional capital. That doesn't matter. You can just say it once was the capital of Mughal India. Now later they moved to another part of India, but in this period of the 1500s, this was their new capital. Okay, that's plenty on the meaning here. Is this balanced? I would say yes, although I know a lot of people look at it and say, well, this whole bunch of people, the majority of human figures are all bunched up in the middle left, or sorry, middle right side of this painting. But to me, these buildings balance out. If you go from here to here, and then you go from him down to here, and then you've got these figures down here, to me, they roughly balance, you know, the figures at the top and the bottom. But if you see it differently, I wouldn't dispute it, because there is some kind of empty space here. So perhaps you want to write that it seems more unbalanced toward the right because of that. I think top to bottom, it's again a matter of how you see it. If you think of this as empty space, you probably think of it as unbalanced toward the top. But look, there's empty space here, which I see is roughly equal to that down below the median line. So I think of it as roughly balanced both ways, but I wouldn't dispute if it's on the exam. If you said you didn't and thought it was unbalanced toward the right and or towards the top. Okay, rhythm, wow, this is all about that. Style of painting is all about the repeated shapes of the human bodies, the arms, hands, legs, heads, turbans, and of course, some of the other items on the buildings, the walls and arches and towers. There's lots of rhythm. I don't see many straight lines except the corners, maybe the very edges of, I guess, just the nearest corners of each building. But the rest, even of those three buildings, is diagonal, aren't they? The majority of the lines on the architectures. So, and all the human figures and animals are, I don't see any one of them that's totally straight upright. So it's mostly dynamic. For space, you do not have diminishing size. Look carefully, because he, the emperor Akbar, is larger than the figures closest to us. Of course, that's partly a symbolic method of saying he's the most important figure, of course. So the only technique here I see is overlapping. Some people see foreshortening. I don't on these two buildings, but maybe on the wall here, maybe. So you might say there's minimal foreshortening on one of the three buildings. I guess some people might. I don't see it here though. It's not narrower there than here. So just maybe on the building at the upper left. Otherwise, it's just overlapping for space. The largest mass, well, it'll be one of these three buildings. It's a close call. Perhaps the one in the upper left corner. And then the other two are about equal. And then the largest human figure, of course, is the emperor, Akbar. And then the lines I already said are all thin outlines. There isn't much modeling in this style of painting. There's a little bit here on the grain down here. You might say just a hint of it on the upper bodies of some of the servants. But mostly it's very minimal. Most of the figures have no modeling. But there is some texture, really nicely done on the hair, the beards, the turbans, the clothing, and of course the buildings, the stonework. Mixture of warm, we already covered this, but you know, warm, cool. You guys could do all that now, I think by now, since you've almost all written your first paper. The most important exception of cool color is the white robes on Akbar. And let's see, modeling, I already covered that. Let's see, rhythm. Yes, well, I think I did. I covered that, right? Oh, texture. Nope, we covered it. Am I missing anything? I don't think so. Yeah, okay, moving on. This is also a very interesting one. This is a little bit later in the Mogul period, but there's a lot of meaning to this one. The title, here we go, is Jahangir, Jahangir, and Shah Abbas, and that's Shah, just like the word Shah today, is the same meaning. A ruler. In part of the Muslim world, they call them Shahs. Shah. And then Abbas is the name of that ruler, Abbas. India, and the date is 1618. Okay, this has a political message. This one, just not just recording. In fact, it doesn't record any event. So the other one did, recorded an actual event, not this one. This was symbolic of the dominance of the Mogul rulers over the Afghan rulers. Interesting, isn't it? Afghanistan's been in the news a lot lately. Anyway, so what we have is two rulers embracing, but the symbolism here just screams that the man that would be, of course, Jahangir or Shah Abbas, well, it would be Jahangir because the Shah is the one on the left, and Jahangir is the dominant figure in both the drawing and in reality. He ruled a huge empire, right? India, Pakistan, and of course, parts of Bangladesh and other places. Whereas Afghanistan, although it's not a small country, it has nowhere near the population, of course, of India and or the subcontinent. So the wealthier, more powerful ruler is shown larger, both just physically larger and taller. But if that's not enough to get across the meaning, he's standing on the back of a lion, which is always symbolic, right, of the strength of a ruler, always meant to symbolize the rulers guarding their kingdom. And this guy, the weaker of the rulers, is standing on a lamb. But that's obvious what the symbolism is. But I find in some ways the most interesting, and there's a map of their two different. See, he's standing over what would be today Afghanistan, and here we have Jahangir standing over, well, even further away, but closest to in the bottom of the lion is just over India there. Okay, the last part of the meaning here is this is a halo. That's, I know mostly people think of that as a Christian religious term, but it's not only used for Christian art. Here it is, a golden sun-like disc behind the head of, yes, the glorious ruler, the dominant, more powerful ruler here. That's Jahangir. And so it's supposed to, and again, if it needed to be more emphasis than we've already mentioned, that's one more detail in this painting that helps describe who's the more power, define who's the more powerful ruler. Interesting, isn't it? These faces of these angels, these cherub-like figures, that almost does look Christian to me in terms of the style of the art. Okay, and when was this done? During the Mughal period. So I already defined that. So if it's on the exam, you could add that as part of the meaning of, I don't have to repeat that, who the Mughals were, you have that definition. Okay, formal analysis. It's balanced. Yes, roughly, but you can make the case, since the Mogul ruler is wider and taller, that it's unbalanced toward the right. And I actually would agree with that if you do the line right between them. Top to bottom, I'd say it's roughly balanced because the globe, they knew the earth was round by this time, right? And then the disc above them, of course, that is his halo, roughly equal, roughly. And plus, it depends on where you draw the line of their two bodies, but, roughly equal top and bottom, above and below the waistline. So I'd say it's definitely roughly balanced top to bottom and slightly or somewhat unbalanced toward the right. The lines are all thin outline because this is Mogul painting again. And the detailing of the cement texture, it's superb on their clothing, their robes. Yeah, look at his face. Look at the fine detail on his eyes and his mouth and his hair and his mustache. It's superb. So there is really good, realistic cement texture. I don't see any modeling here. Actually, I take that back. On the two animals, yes, there is some on the lamb and minimal on the lion. The colors, cool mostly on Jahangir and mostly warm on the Shah. And of course, warm on the background of the halo, but cool on the sky right above them, around them, I should say. And then warm mostly on the bottom, except for the lamb. It's dynamic and stable. They're both leaning into each other, but the bottom part of his body is definitely stable. And the two animals are pretty much horizontal. So I'd say they're mostly stable, except for their heads. But the globe and the halo, so it's more dynamic than stable, obviously. The largest mass, that's a close call. Maybe the halo, then the globe, and then Jahangir in that order. Okay. And for space, you have only overlapping. Well, you could make the case there's some foreshortening on the shoulders. Yeah, I guess you could say that. Minimal foreshortening on just their upper bodies. The rest is just overlapping. Okay, we're going to cut one of these. I think I actually did already yeah, I did. I cut it already from the syllabus. But this is going to be quite important. But before we get to this, I'm going to do this and go back to, because I can tell you which ones are so important. And the next one is, of course, the Taj Mahal. That one I'm not cutting from the study list. All right, this is seated Buddha. Buddha is, if you didn't already know how to spell Buddha, seated Buddha. Cambodia, the country, like today it's called Cambodia. You may know how to spell, but I'll spell it for you. Cambodia. And we don't know the exact year, so you can always ignore the little c in the syllabus if it's on the exam, but it means about 1200, roughly 1200. So what have we got here? We've got a self-portrait. Whoa, why did it? Things like to jump around. Here we go. This is the must-know slide. This is a dual meaning. First of all, Buddha, of course, was the one who founded Buddhism. So I need to give you that definition. It's not very long, but it's not short. So I will say it slowly and repeat it. That definition you don't want to forget. It's very likely to come up at some point on the final, almost certain. So Buddhism is a religion that was founded in India about 500 BC. Isn't that interesting? Two of the world's most major religions, both founded in the same part of the world. So again, of course, you could say the same about Christianity and Islam, right? They're both founded in the Middle East. So again, this is, I'll say it again, Buddhism, the definition is a religion that was founded in India about 500 BC or BCE, which teaches that there is an eightfold path to enlightenment, semicolon, or colon, which teaches that there is an eightfold path to enlightenment, colon, or semicolon, whichever you prefer. That includes, and here they are, I'm going to only give you 5, but these are the 5 most important ones. They say right mean correct. Okay, right thinking, right attitude, right action, right speech, and right livelihood. Again, it's right thinking, right attitude, right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Meaning if you go out in the world and you do the right thing and you don't harm other people in your speech, your action, your work, your career, then you are at least on the path to enlightenment, which of course isn't the same as dying and going to heaven. That's a Christian and basically also a Muslim concept. It's not a place, it's a state of being, as some of you already know. I'm sure a lot of you know a lot about Buddhism. Some of you may practice it. Another religion that I've had several family members of mine decided to pursue, and got to go with them to Buddhist temples, first in Chicago, then in LA, and then in other parts of the world. It's an amazing religion because, of course, it tries to teach people to treat everybody equally and without any harm done between fellow human beings. Except if you're physically being attacked or something, well, that's different, but you're not supposed to harm other people. So does anybody need me to repeat that definition in Buddhism? Because it'll probably come up on both one of the slides and the true false section of the final. Okay, so Buddha was the founder of that religion, and we don't have time to go into a lot of detail. I wish we did, but I would be remiss not to say one thing about him. The founder of Buddhism, Buddha, is just the name that was given to him. That wasn't his actual birth name, but that's what he's called by his followers. He's the first one to talk about this eightfold path to enlightenment. And he was the prince, the son of a ruler who could have had a life of luxury and, ease and wealth. And he gave it all up to wander around India. So I'll repeat this as part of the meaning, who Buddha was. And finally, one day, he sat under a tree. I know there's a name for it. It's a special kind of, you could say a magic tree or a unique tree. And he had an epiphany or a moment of enlightenment in which he decided that the main cause of human suffering is desire, if you think about it, I know it sounds so simplistic, but it's really profound, obviously. Of course it is. All of us have desires that ultimately almost always conflict with somebody else's. Look at what the world's been going through since COVID. That's nothing else, obviously. So I'll say that again. Buddha's first simple revelation, or single revelation, that helped him start this philosophy, it's really almost more a philosophy than a religion, about how to live life, was that the fact that human suffering, the root of it all is desire, human desires, and the conflicts that those lead to. So then he came up with the Eightfold Path. Boy, am I simplifying it. I know some of you will go, wait a minute, that's not very much in depth, but that's, you know, the minimum, at least, that's adequate to give you some idea of how it differs from all the other world religions. Especially those that believe in a life after death and a heaven and all that. That's not the same. It's a state of being you're aiming for, of enlightenment. Okay, so the other half of the meaning, or part of the meaning, it won't take very long, is that most historians believe this is a portrait of that king of Cambodia who was a devout Buddhist and wanted to be shown as though he were Buddha, and that would make him much more respected, and he would even say admired by his subjects. So he's seated in the lotus position, right? That's what that's called, where the legs are crossed. Obviously, the arms have been missing for centuries, but his eyes are closed, the last part of the meaning, and he's in a meditative state. He's meditating, or you could say praying if you want, but that kind of implies something a little different. He's trying to achieve enlightenment and decide how to behave along that path that we described towards enlightenment, what actions he should do. Of course, as a ruler, he had more opportunities to do good or harm to people. So this is, most historians believe, a dual portrait, one of Buddha, the way they think he actually looked, and one where the king of Cambodia, who commissioned it, has done as a self-portrait to show his faith in Buddhism and his sincere devotion to the beliefs of the teachings of Buddha. There's plenty on the meaning. It is life-size, and I guess you could say there was one technique for space. So it's about the size of an adult male figure, human figure, but it's seated. So of course it's nowhere near 6 feet. It's probably about 3 feet tall. And his legs are overlapping. It's the only aspect of the technique of space. You can see it's a cool color, off-white. See, the texture is superb, isn't it? On his face and on his body. There's the smooth texture of the stone itself. Of course, it's been rubbed smooth. You can tell people have been touching this knee here and these toes. It's fascinating. You can tell whether human beings wanted to touch this. Probably the arms when they were still on there, the hands where the elbows were worn. But originally it was all this color here. So off-white, cool colors. Carved light is used to create the cement textures, especially on that wonderfully meditative state of mind that the face depicts. The rhythm is obvious. Although the arms are missing, they were originally there. The 2 legs, 2 feet, 2 eyes. And of course, it's not obvious. It has 2 ears. Both ears are there. And then we have no modeling except that the lighting from, it's in a museum, the lighting from the museum. There's no technique for modeling. It's really only one mass, but I guess you could call the base a separate mass. That is original. So I guess it's 2. If you look at it that way, he obviously, the figure is the largest and the base. Balanced, yes. Even to the point of where the 2 arms are missing equally, pretty much. So it's balanced with him, and it's mostly stable. It's pretty much at right angles here, right? So just the top of his head is dynamic, and the edges, knees, you could say, kneecaps, I guess, of his legs. Okay, and I already said the line is all carved. Okay, now let's go back to maybe the most important slide. It is for this lecture, and I think you all have seen this more than a couple times in your life, but some of you may know the meaning, but you do want to take the notes the way I'm going to give them to you, because we could spend half an hour on this. We don't have that much time. I'm going to give you the main facts that might appear or be, if it appears as is highly likely on the final that you'd want to have under meaning. Okay, the name of it, I'm sure you all know, I'll spell it, is Taj, 2 words, Mahal, T-A-J, then M-A-H-A-L. The location is Agra, India. That's A-G-R-A, India, 1648. Okay, why does it matter that we say the town? Because there is more than one Taj Mahal in India, or more than one place called the Taj Mahal, but the world thinks of only this place. So we give you the actual city that it is, well, it's on the edges of the city, but one of the larger cities in India, Agra, India. Okay, so if you just said India, you get a point or two off. If you didn't use the full description of the location the way it is, of course, on the syllabus. So this is a structure built by the Mogul ruler. His name was Shah Jahan. Now, when I teach in person, I write these things on the board. So I'll just slowly spell the names here. Shah Jahan. Now, this guy's name can be spelled several different ways, but the way I've seen it most often is J-E-H-A-N. So Shah, I've already spelled that right. It's on the syllabus, S-H-A-H. Jahan. He was the emperor of the Mughal kingdom of India at this time.
One more time.
Sorry, question? Somebody had a question?
No. Yeah, could you say Jihan one more time?
Yeah, sure. Capital J-E-H-A-N. Okay, that doesn't tell us what the building is for. I bet some of you know this, but if you don't, you definitely need to write. There are three purposes for this structure, three reasons that Shah Jahan had it built. First, it's a functioning mosque. It always has been. I think it closed briefly after 9/11. That's what I was told, but hardly ever in the 400 years it's almost been since it opened. So it's a functioning mosque first. Second, it's a mausoleum where the body of his deceased wife, the empress or queen of that, empress would be a more common word. She died at 32, giving birth to their 14th child. And they were childhood sweethearts. There really is evidence to prove they genuinely loved and respected each other from the first time they were, it's an arranged marriage, right? Their parents arranged it, of course. But they actually, unlike some arranged marriage, they really loved each other. And he never really got over her death. I mean, even back then, that's pretty young, 32, right? In childbirth, it's really tragic. So he built this as both a mausoleum where her sarcophagus is inside here, inside the mosque. And the third purpose is a monument to his undying love for his deceased wife. That's really the only way to say that. A monument to his undying love for his deceased wife. And that's how most people think of it, because it is considered, most of you have read this, or if you have any interest in this building and this site, you may know this, but if not, write it down. It's considered the most beautiful building in the world by millions of, just say many people, you have to write a number, by many people around the world. It's always listed as one of the most popular and well-known sites in the world every time there's a survey. And the UN does these all the time, and other groups do them too, but the UN does these, worldwide, every country. They say, what buildings or sites do you think are the most beautiful in the world? And almost always this is at or near the top of the list. And for good reason, because it's a classic example of Mogul Islamic, of course, that you don't have to say that, the name means that. So just say Mogul architecture. It has Islamic features, though, that are common to all mosques. Let's start with the pointed arches. Those were invented by Muslims, not Gothic architects in France. They borrowed the pointed arch from Islamic culture. Of course, they made it more than just decorative. Here it's all just decorative. Gothic cathedrals, the arches help support the towers, the 500 feet, 500-foot tall towers. Here, this doesn't support anything, it's decorative. But nonetheless, the beautiful appearance of this is considered part of the design features that create that. The pointed arches. Another is the deeply recessed niches. That's really the only word for it, where the modeling or shadows create a very multi-dimensional effect. Visually, it feels like the building is on different planes. I don't know any other way to say it, right? You see this, the deeply recessed niches are part of what makes it so beautiful. Then there's the third thing would be the use of the pure white marble. That's what it's made out of. And finally, you have the multiple domes. These are really not domes technically, but we'll call them domes, keep it simple. They're actually small cupolas, but we'll just say the smaller domes flanking the main dome, the shape of those domes, the onion shape, isn't Muslim, it's Russian. The onion domes were invented in Russia about 1,000 years before this building was built on the earliest Christian churches. I know, I've seen them, I've been there. So they, for one, cultures borrow from each other. That's why cultural appropriation, I may go on a limb here, it's not always wrong. We have to learn from each other. And as long as it's done respectfully, I don't see a problem with it. Otherwise, the world wouldn't learn anything from other cultures, right? So these wonderfully original mosques in all of Islam, including Mughal mosques, say that fast, did only their own original ideas, except that they borrowed one thing from another culture, and that was the onion dome that was borrowed from Russia. Look at a map, Russia and India are almost touch. They're very close to each other. So they traded with each other. And then the last Islamic feature that is unique at that time in the world to Muslim architecture is a reflecting pool. It may be the most effective thing done here to create this sense of beauty. Look at the reflection. Isn't it amazing? This is wonderful. So the reflecting pool is an Islamic invention. The pointed arches are, right? And the minarets, of course. And then finally, the decorative carving is shows not a single living creature. Muslims mosque, or just, you can just say mosque because it implies, obviously they're for Muslim house of worship. So just say mosques never, ever, ever, it's against their religion, show living things. No living things. Only Allah can do that, has the power. So you're not, in drawing or painting or architecture, you're not supposed to depict a living creature anywhere on the inside or outside of a mosque. I've been to, like I said, dozens of them, and I've never seen any exceptions. So the carved decorations are geometric patterns, and we'll go up close again. Actually, I have another view. Let's go to the other view. There we go. There we go. Geometric patterns and plant motifs. Those are allowed in Islam. That's an Islamic prayer, by the way. And I'm not sure which language it is. It doesn't look Arabic to me. It's probably not, but it's hard to say. Many of the prayers are Arabic. So just say most of the time you see Arabic prayers carved around the entrance, and only a minimal decoration allowed are the plant motifs. Obviously, those are vines, and geometric patterns. So in that sense, this is a classic example of all mosque architecture, but it's much more than that because of the beauty of all the other features. You put them all together and you create something the world just seems to have fallen in love with. I will say there was another one being planned by this same Shah. It would have been black, the entire, can you imagine, out of a dark black stone, because his mourning got worse, I guess. He could have remarried any, unmarried woman in all of India of age, right, unattached, whatever. He never did. And in fact, his son overthrew him, saying his father had gone mad with grief and imprisoned his own father. So that's the final fact you could add about the meaning, which is the fact that the second version of this was being planned when he was overthrown by his own son and put in prison, where he died. And it would have been black. A very different effect. Maybe beautiful as well, but very different mood would have been created by it. Oh, I will say this too. I almost forgot. You could add this. The reflecting pool should look vaguely familiar to those of you who've been to Washington, D.C. I know some of you said so in your mini bios, but you've all seen news reports from Washington there all the time. Anybody know where there's a famous reflecting pool in Washington?
Opposite the Washington Monument.
Yes, between the Washington and Lincoln Memorial. Most people just say in front of the Lincoln Memorial because it was part of that building, and that's an important detail you could add as part of the meaning. The architect of that site, including the reflecting pool, an American architect, 100 years ago exactly, went to India and studied this site. That's how he got the idea for the reflecting pool in front of the Lincoln Memorial, which, as you may know, has been the site of many major events, not the least of which was Martin Luther King's famous speech, which I got to see live on TV. So the reflecting pools in many other parts of the world are directly inspired by this one, which is an early Islamic invention. They were hundreds of years old already, the reflecting pools. The architects were Persian, by the way. They were from Persia. They were imported by the Shah to design this because they were the best architects in all of Islam, the Persians, and they invented the reflecting pool. But all the other features I just told you were basic to other mosques, except, of course, including the minarets, remember, the onion domes, which are Russian in origin. Okay, plenty of meaning. Balanced, yes. Left to right, I would say definitely not the bottom is heavier. So, of course, that is weighted or unbalanced with the bottom. The bottom section here is the largest mass. If you count that, you could say the main facade. That's the easiest way to say it. Then the base is pretty wide, so I forget how far it goes. It might actually be a larger mass, but in this photo, it looks to be the second largest, and then the main dome, the central dome. Unless you count the reflecting pool, then it's up to you to decide if that looks bigger, because this doesn't show the whole pool. Whoever was standing there, aimed the camera partway down the pool, obviously. But I would just focus on the building here. For space, it's about 100 and about 130 feet to the top of the finial. There's another finial, right, on top of the dome. And the base here is about 30 feet. So it has a 30-foot high base. And then the total height from the foundation to the top of the finial is about 100, it might be 125. So just say between 120 and 130 feet or nearly 130 feet if you want to keep it simple. And inside it is one large open prayer room with smaller rooms around that, along the sides, you could say, smaller rooms, of which one is the room where the sarcophagus is. It's a cool white color. There is modeling in this building. Modeling is part of the design. Without it, it wouldn't look as beautiful. Those deeply recessed niches create strong modeling. The rhythm is obvious. The onion domes, the minarets, the pointed arches, the carved geometric decorations. Powerful rhythm. It's dynamic on the domes and the arches, stable on the outer walls and the reflecting pool. And like all minarets, the minarets are both round and straight. So they're both stable and dynamic. The textures here are the real smooth texture of marble. I don't really see in this photo. It'd be the one you have to look at. It's not close enough to say there's similar texture. And even up close, I don't think you can see much of that on the vine pattern. That's not really, that's just line. So that's carved line is used here and visual. Visual line around the arches carved on the decorations. I think I've covered it all for space. Yeah. All right. We have time for one more. Let me see what it says. Oh, the stupa. We're going to talk about, let's see. Yeah. Okay. This is the Shwedagon. That's SHWEDAGON. SHWEDAGON. Stupa, STUPA. I'm using the word Burma because the modern dictatorship, you don't have to write this, but if you just want to know why, you can use either word. I put Myanmar, which is what the media calls it now, and many, many other people I know, most people know. Right, it's MYANMAR, is the most common name for that country that used to be called Burma, but there's a problem with that. According to people I know, journalists, mostly American and I think British that I know who've been to, I haven't been to that country, have said that the dictatorship, brutal, bloody dictatorship, this, right? That just took over that country. They have been ruling it for like 50 years now. And they wanted to change the name to direct public attention away from their brutality. And so they started using the name Myanmar. But I don't know for sure that that's the reason. But you can use either word is the point. So let's give you the year of this one. We don't know the exact year. So when we say 15th century, you probably know that's 1400s. If you don't, you want to write it that way, you can. I.e. sometime in the 1400s. It took a few decades. So a stupa, last new definition, I'll keep it brief. Stupa is a Buddhist house of worship, Buddhist or Hindu, it can be either. Sorry, Buddhist or Hindu house of worship, and this one is Buddhist. A Buddhist or Hindu house of worship with a large central dome, a large central dome, beneath which the worshipers walk. beneath which the worshippers walk in a clockwise direction. Sorry, it's a long one. Around a collection of religious relics. Around a collection of religious relics. Every stupa has those features in common. But this one's almost unique because it's like an upside down umbrella, huge, gigantic umbrella made of gold. It's beautiful. I have friends who've been there have shown me their own slides of it. So it is about 600 years old, and what looks like gold is, now that's over brick or stone, I think it's brick, which of course creates the walls, the interior walls, and this would be the dome. If you walked inside, you look up and you see the dome and maybe just a small, narrow tunnel-like passage to the top of the tower there. And then you'd walk around in a clockwise direction, some religious relics, supposedly aspects of Buddha's life. But you know, how many different places in the world can have his footprints? But some of them claim to have fossilized footprints of Buddha inside, you know, so it doesn't matter what they are, but they're just Buddhist religious relics that you're supposed to look at and pray. Well, we use that word. I shouldn't use that word. Meditate, right? About the meaning, right, of Buddhism and how to become enlightened when you're inside the temple while you're walking around those religious relics. That's pretty much the whole meaning. It has been, oh, one more fact, and then we'll do a quick form analysis and call it a day. This is gold here has been replaced by different Buddhist countries, governments, nearby, you can say neighboring Buddhist countries, pay for the replacing of the gold on the walls, on the outer walls of this stupa. And so it's been redone many times since the 1400s. That's why it looks so shiny and new. Okay, formal analysis, completely symmetrical left to right, totally unbalanced toward the bottom. By the way, that's not part of the stupa. That should be obvious. This is the structure that we're talking about. And of course, it's really one mass, but you could break it down and say that's a cupola, a little room on top of the tower, right? And then above that's a finial. If you want to break it down, you could into three parts. And obviously the stupa itself, the temple, is the largest mass. For space, it's about 100 feet high to the top of the finial. So it's one large open domed room with a tower above it that reaches about 100 feet above the ground. The color is warm, of course. The texture is the real smooth texture of gold. You don't have to, there's a few carved decorations, but you can't see them very well here. So the line is carved line here, visual and carved, because the carved line creates a visual effect. There is only the shadows from the sun. That's the natural modeling. And it's, I don't think there's much stable unless you count the very bottom, the base here, I guess you could, but even it kind of has a diagonal to it. So maybe some of the carved lines on the base, but otherwise it's almost entirely dynamic, as you can see, looking up towards the sky here. I think I mentioned the rhythm. I know I might not have the different carved lines along the base. Well, actually also in the middle of the tower. And then the, you know, outer shape of it that looks like one giant upside down umbrella. That's how it's been described by many visitors in art history texts. I think I've covered all the elements on this. So we should stop now. I'll probably do the one other, but I may just cut it. We'll see. The Kundus Minaret Mosque in Indonesia. We'll see. But next week, we are going to talk about art from India and Japan, and that's a lot to cover. So I'll probably just, why don't we just go ahead and cross it off now? Kundus Minaret Mosque, because it could be confusing with the Khatib Minar, right? Because that's also a mosque in a part of the world. So we'll just cross that off. One last slide to have to worry about. That's second from the bottom on tonight and today's list. Okay, this will be posted, of course, if you joined late or you left early. And remember, you guys will have an added 10 points option if you choose to exercise. Maximum point total is 60 now, not 50 on extra credit for those who might have, that might help some of you if you somehow didn't get the exam turned in before the deadline. But it's the same for everybody, so no one has an advantage over anyone else in any of my classes. Okay, any questions you guys have? Now's the time to ask about anything we just showed. Sure, go ahead.
Could you show one more picture of that seated Buddha again?
Yeah, sure.
If that's not too hard.
Yeah, I think it's quite beautiful. Any question about it?
No, I was just noticing something. I didn't see it before.
I have two tips for you. If you, as most people are, when you stand in front of a statue like this, or the actual portraits of Buddha, which there are many all around the world, the two best museums I've been to, and that's all over the United States, where there are Buddhist, galleries of Buddhist art that go back, some of them 2,000 years, sculpture, statues, figurines, paintings, bas-relief panels, are the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco. There's a 10-point extra credit option, or the Art Institute of Chicago, where I grew up. It has a wonderful section on Asian art going back 1,000 years or more. And if I had time, I'd show you my slides of some of the Buddha figures there. They're just exquisite, is the word I'd use, exquisite. I just love the detailing on the face, the carving, the contemplation, and the state of mind he's in. Yeah, it's a wonderful image. Any other questions?
And you were saying the three things that you keep in mind when you view a statue or a sculpture piece? Or did I misunderstand you?
Not sure. I said three things. Say your question again.
I'm sorry, I thought you said something like, whenever you look at a statue or sculpture, there are three things that you keep in mind or you view, but maybe I misunderstood you.
I think that was about some other aspect of another slide.
Okay, that's not.
Yeah, I think it was about the Taj Mahal, which was used as three different purposes, right? That's what I think you're thinking of. Yeah, and of course this is all recorded, so you can go replay, any previous part of this. But I'm sticking around again a few more minutes if there are people with other questions about anything extra credit or any of the comments we have or topics we've covered in today's lecture. Any questions?
Yeah, real quick, Mark.
Sure.
You mentioned, since we're on the seated Buddha slide, you mentioned that it's right thinking, right attitude, right speech, right action, and what was the last one?
Right livelihood, meaning occupation.
Livelihood.
Yeah, that's important. There are three others, but those are the five that my Buddhist, really devout Buddhist friends have told me are the most important ones. And I didn't want to overwhelm you with having to remember 8 of them. I'm not going to ask you to recall all 5. I might give you a true false question like on the final quiz. Buddhism includes all of the following, right? I might say, and then I might say, right sports, or what, that wouldn't be that obvious. That's false. Remember, well, the true false questions, most of you understood, the ones I've graded so far, your midterms that I've started grading, understood that if any part of that statement is false, the whole thing is false. So if I listed 3 or 4 or even all 5 of those, and they were all from that list, I just recalled, that would be true, that'd be correct. But you aren't gonna have to write them from memory, for your notes. Remember, it's an open book test. Okay, good question. Anybody else?
Yeah, Mark, I was wondering if you could go over the rhythm again of the stupa.
The Stupa, sure. Yeah, we should keep it on it, sure. The rhythm here, it's pretty much focused, primarily limited to the carved lines. You could say steps, because they do form steps if you get up close. You see that? Or ridges. I prefer the word ridges on the base. And then the outer edges, right? Both sides of this bulging umbrella, upside down umbrella, right? Including the handle, if you want to call it that. That creates rhythm. You shouldn't have to go into the detail. It's hard to see here. So just two aspects of rhythm. The ridges along the base and the outer, both sides of the outer walls of the dome tower. That's it. That's the rhythm. Okay. Any other questions? Anybody else has? Okay, I'm going to not absolutely commit to this, but I think I can get the midterms back by a week from Monday, or at the latest a week from Wednesday, to everybody. And I will individually email you when each one of yours is graded at the end of each day, or I get a batch of them back from my readers, and I'll double check, as I always do, the readers' work to make sure they didn't make a mistake and overlook something. And if they do, I add those points back in. And so then you'll get a brief explanation. If you get an A, I'm just going to say, you got 95 or 98. I mean, that's an A, right? Congratulations. But if you got anything less than an A, I will explain what you missed. And I, of course, accept any questions you might have, but I can tell you right now that we're very thorough, or I am anyway, always. That's my commitment to you, is I don't just quickly glance over your answers. I read each one carefully, or double check the reader's work to make sure that they didn't miss something. So usually there isn't any correction needed, but you'll get those scores, maybe all in one big group, but most of you, those of you who've already turned in your midterms, you'll be getting those, I think, a week from Wednesday, because I hope to get the papers back to everybody before that, because there's still about a dozen people who haven't turned their papers in, and you have that right. You know, it's your option to turn in papers late, but don't push it too much, because you've got a second paper coming up in about 4 weeks. And then, of course, the final, and you have other classes, I'm sure most of you, where you also have papers and exams. So hopefully I'll start seeing some of the late papers. But those will be whenever I get to them. But the ones turned in on time, I'm going to try to finish those by the week after next. So maybe a week from Monday, you'll get the papers if everything works smoothly, which light doesn't usually do, but if it does, and then the exams the next time, the next class by then, hopefully. Graded. Okay, any questions? Any other urgent matters? You can always email me, of course, and just give me a day or two to get back to you, depending on when you email me. All right. Thank you all, everybody. Any other?
Thanks, Mark. Have a good day.
You
All right,
too.
see you
Yeah,
later.
take care. See you soon. Bye. Next week.